What's going on, y'all? My name's Bless. I've been surrounded by hip-hop my entire life and literally grew up in the music business. Behind the scenes, beyond the music, the industry, and the streets, these are our stories. Join me as we explore the culture that defined our generation. This is The Moment of Truth.
We were just talking about Lenny's approach to, when he found an artist or an act that he was interested in working with. Please continue, I cut you off.
Just that because I'm a musician and able to understand music as a language, whenever I looked at artists that I wanted to work with, or whether I wanted to work with them or not, and I was working with them, I always felt I had a deeper understanding of what they were trying to do musically and what message they were trying to get across, not just lyrically, but also in the pulse of the music, and in looking at a bunch of bands over the years that I was thinking of signing or was working with, it was being able to play guitar was always my secret weapon, like my
to create that vibe with the artist,
or more just like if I wanted to work with an artist, if I was a better guitar player than the guitar player in the band, that was a sure sign that I shouldn't sign them. It was almost like you
or an easy way to thug yourself in the group.
No, it was just like a benchmark for me that I wanted to work, because I never really considered myself a musician or an artist until recently.
I know all the years that we knew each other, you never shared that. I just would come into your office and see
Lenny,
the guitar neatly displayed.
Why not?
Why not? I kind of like woke up one day and I was like 44 years old, and I picked up my guitar and I started playing, and I was like, fuck, I can play, and I think it had to do just with self-discovery and not, like often we're our own worst enemies in terms of how we restrict ourselves or our thought or our potential, because we're not really following our own narrative. We're listening to too many people externally,
allowing ourselves to be in a box, put ourselves in a box.
Yes, or even you're putting yourself in a box, or just having a certain, kind of narrow-casted kind of view of
what your identity should be,
and or where you want to go and how you want to get there, and what you want to be when you get there. And for me, I was always an enabler for artists, and I was close with artists, and they were able to, communicate with me and confide in me because they knew that I understood music from their level. Even though they may not have known that I played or whatever, I was still able to find this very communicative vibe with them because they trusted me, because they knew I understood what they were trying to do. Not just achieve, and be successful, and at the time, whether it's sell records or whatever it is, streams, or whatever the case is, whatever the model. It was beyond that. It was, they had something to say, and they wanted it to be, this indelible kind of mark that they left.
Every artist wants to make their mark. That's the goal, the first goal for anything.
Yes, and it's to ultimately, give back. I think there's something that's very rewarding in
Contributing to the
giving
culture.
back.
Yeah.
Whether I was on the business end or the artist end, I received so much from music in so many ways, so much knowledge, so much just of my passion, so much of the way I understand the world is really related to music. And I always wanted to give something back, positive back to it.
Yeah.
In a little way, in a large way.
Well, you definitely have.
Thank you.
In case you're unaware of where you are.
You have too.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
This is the Moment of Truth podcast. Bless, let me know.
God.
Lenny Levine is in the motherfucking building. Thank you for coming, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was nice to reconnect after all this time.
Absolutely. Little background to give a little context. Lenny's a wild motherfucker. Lenny's a guy I grew up.
Don't tell anyone, you'll ruin my reputation.
I think that is your reputation. A rogue executive from the slimy, scummy business we love so much called entertainment.
Yeah.
Lenny was a gentleman that was at my record label, the first record label that I was signed to. Shout out DKD, Donald K. Donald. And then that's where me and Lenny's journey starts together. I'm 15, 16 years old.
Donald K.
They bring me into this office across from the old Montreal Forum, and they're all looking at me like an alien, like, what the fuck do you want us to do with this kid? And Lenny...
No, but wait, you were with Awesome at the time.
Just before Awesome got involved.
Okay.
It was Terry Flood, God bless Terry Flood, rest in peace, who introduced me to Donald K. Donald.
I think he's still alive.
Terry?
Yeah.
Is he? No, I think he passed away.
No.
Oh God,
I don't think so.
Awkward. Well, we better figure that one out and edit it out. I had heard Terry passed away. So cut. So
Maybe
Terry
I'm
Flood
wrong.
introduced.
I think yeah. Okay.
Terry Flood introduced me to Donald K. Donald. We have to figure out if
or leave that. I think you should leave it.
Yeah, this is epic.
Totally leave it.
This is epic.
It's hilarious.
This
is
totally,
epic.
yeah, that's
This is
totally
epic.
yeah.
So Terry Flood brings me to Donald K. Donald, who brings me into the office and introduces me to
Terry.
this gentleman. And you ended up putting together.
But I'm not dead yet.
But you should be, man. All the partying those guys did. I don't know. It's highly unlikely.
Terry's like the greatest Terry Flood line is, okay, he was on the Festival Express. That I don't know if you guys know about it. Back in the day, there was this train that toured across Canada with these crazy, amazing artists on it, and Terry was on that train. And I can't. I'm going to get it wrong, but Buddy Guy,
Wow.
Janis Joplin,
What?
Grateful Dead, and Terry was on the train because Mash McCann. He was managing this Canadian rock band, like pre Guess Who era, I guess. Mash McCann. Okay, this is a
Crazy.
true story.
I didn't know that.
And so Terry's on. Like, there's a film about it. There's a documentary called The Festival Express. Now, I don't remember seeing Terry in it. Nonetheless, okay, he's on this train.
Oh, he's been there.
He's
forever.
legendary. He's legendary.
A fly on the wall everywhere.
He's a legend.
He's the Forrest Gump of the music business. Is he not?
Anyway, he's on this fucking train. So I asked, he was talking about it, but, not much, and I was like, Terry, what the fuck? What was it like to be on this train? and he's like, Lenny, if you remember it, you weren't really there.
And that is a perfect description of Terry Flood.
Jangling like the change in his pocket while he was saying that.
So Terry brought me to Donald. These are some
Terry.
old school characters.
Sorry, guys.
No, that's a great
Quick impersonation
of Terry. So I meet these larger than life characters. To put it nicely, and they introduced me to the younger hip side of the company, which was yourself
Parkside.
and Parkside Mike.
He was always much hipper than me.
You're pretty hip. You're pretty hip.
Right.
I always noticed that he had crisp white shell toe Adidas, which resonated with me because that's that hip hop shit. That's that
True.
Run DMC. So I liked him immediately.
Yeah.
I'm like, who's this Jewish guy? Does he know about hip hop? Oh shit, he got nice shoes. All right, I'll listen to it. So he put together the marketing plan. Am I correct? For my first, or you worked on it for the
Probably.
first project?
Me or
I think you worked on
Parkside?
it, both of you.
I know,
remember
I-
coming into your office and showing you the first proofs of the cover.
I know I worked on it also with regard to, because we always went after government grants like Factor and that kind of thing, right? So yeah. But it was Parkside who was more, I think, kind of,
Hands-on.
yeah, like in terms of understanding the market, and he was the one who was on the ground.
We'll get to some of those stories because they're fucking hilarious. But let's continue on your journey here. So you wind up at this record label with these insane people. And how did you get there? How did you get to DKD?
Oh fuck. Okay. Okay, this is how I did it. It was complicated. I finished working for EMI. I was under contract with them. It was supposed to be a year-long contract that lasted 2 years, and I was filling in for someone who was out on maternity leave, but it just lasted longer than it was supposed to. And I was doing sales and customer service for EMI's Montreal branch. So that meant I was running around to retail a lot, going to, back in the day, it was the Fantazes, the HMVs, the Music Worlds.
And you already had the in because you worked there.
No, it was his job. He was
at
the liaison.
Fantaz, yeah.
Right.
At Fantaz, yeah, but like at the other stores, I had to, learn the personnel and learn the landscape, and some of these stores. I mean, like if you go into, if you were going into like an HMV and like Place Versailles, versus going to Phantasmagoria on, they still had a store on Park, their original store on Park, or if you were going to, back in the day, you had Sam the Record Man also, and you had, like you just had, I mean, if you go even further back, you had A&A as well. And anyway, like by the time I was working for EMI, like mall stores were at their height, That's like going into like Music World had like a ton of fucking stores, and that was the landscape back then. So when I was working for EMI, I was visiting these stores, doing point of purchase displays with posters and selling them like what the new releases are, and pitching them on catalog that we were doing deals on, And so my contract ended, and one of the guys at EMI asked me, so what are you going to do? You're going to go work for a label? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to fucking go work for a label. That's what I'm going to do. And he was like, okay, cool. Good luck. You have no idea what you're walking into. Well, I really wasn't sure how to necessarily go about it. Only I knew that because I had already had experience with Donald's office, when I was at Fantaz, whether it was, he was promoting shows and we were doing promotions and I was able to get backstage passes or whatever the case is, I had experience with his office already, and I knew that he had a bunch of labels, and I also had an in to have a meeting with him. So I had my meeting with Donald, and he was like he liked me and it was cool, but he wasn't about to make the decision. At that time, he still had his hand in concert promotion. Like,
yeah, that was his bread and butter.
Like it wasn't like he had just finished like touring Celine Dion, being Celine Dion's tour producer before she split off and had her own. You know, he wasn't so involved in his record labels, like really hands on like he was in his touring. So he told me to go speak to Mark Lazar, who was the president of Aquarius Records and
My former label.
And Taka Musique.
French side.
Yeah, like big artists for Quebec, like Kevin Parent and France d'Amour and that kind of thing. So
what year was this? Pre-2000?
What year was this? Maybe 2001.
Okay.
2002. Because now I'm trying to like visually see Sum 41's platinum records, you know, and looking at the date on the plaque.
Yes.
Anyway, I think those like started in 2003. So I'm going to say this is around 2001. So Mark was extremely tough to get to. I left him messages, you know, he wasn't returning calls. I showed up at the office once. He didn't see me. Like it was just impossible to get to him. So I said, okay, how the fuck am I going to get this guy to see me? So what I did was I decided to learn what Aquarius's artists were at the time and what Taka's artists were at the time. Okay, it's Kevin Parent, it's April Wine, it's Sash Jordan, it's Biff Naked, it's, you know, like, and I then went and did my own retail tracking. So I went to like 10 different record stores with like a list in my hand and went to like the displays and said, okay, there's 3 of Kevin Parent's latest record at $18.99 at HMV in Place Vertu. And yet they only have 1 of Biff Naked's new record out, you know, and they only have 1 in the bin at $21.99. And then I just did all this kind of like this data research live in the store. Like tried to just do it without anyone noticing. If I had to explain myself, I just made up some bullshit story and that I was from the label or whatever. And then by the end of it had like a dozen stores where I had all of his product tracked, what the prices were, how many were in stock, you know, where they were, like what real estate in the store he had, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I took one of the sheets and I wrote a cover letter and I faxed it to Mark. And I said, yo, I have 11 more like these. Call me if you want to see how your product is positioned in Montreal retail.
Nice.
You know, within 5 minutes, he called me.
Wow.
That day I was in his office.
So you made yourself an asset rather than coming asking for a job. You made yourself, you created a space for yourself.
I created his problem was always sales and sales and sales and sales and, you know, not getting the appropriate looks or space in a store to, you know, or pricing or whatever the case is. Oops. And I gave him all this data. And so when I started there, I started as an intern. And I interned at the label for about like 8 months. And in that time, I became the marketing person. Not because they needed it or whatever, but because they needed it. They needed it.
You created your lane.
Yeah. And then by the end of a year, I walked into Mark's office and he just started laughing. He was like, okay. And that's when I got my first paycheck.
Wow.
He's like, okay, you win.
See, that's such a gem because, you know, there's so many, you know, young cats up and coming who want to get into this business. And I think that there's a lot to be learned from your story that, you know, obviously you got to put yourself in a position to be able to be, you know, considered for such a job. But if you don't create a space for yourself, you don't have a priority or a reason to exist in their eyes, right? Everybody comes and says, you know, give me a fucking paycheck. I want to, you know, work in this industry. But he went and flipped the whole shit and was like, you know what, this is what you're missing. If you fuck with me, I'll help you fill this void. And any good businessman can be like, yeah, jump on board.
Yeah. I mean, well, that was my intent,
Smart.
And, I proved myself to be very valuable to the company. And I really worked with some incredible people there that really taught me the business on the other side, because I had come from a retail kind of base, and of course my own musical exploration, in seeing shows. I mean, so many shows. And so now I was being, taught essentially by guys like by Donald and René Leblanc, and these are, guys that are veterans to the wars, and I had a chance to work with some really, really cool artists and get to see the underside of the business and understand the inner workings a little bit more, and develop what I was capable of doing in terms of working with an artist, not only or not necessarily on the creative in terms of the A&R side, but rather on the marketing and promo side, and in really kind of helping them build their careers.
And also defining what their image would be in terms of how it's going to get blasted out to the public.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you want to be perceived? What do you want your look to be? Are we going with this look? Are we, how are we marketing you?
It was the creative on the other side.
Exactly.
And
which is, some might say, now more important, and then just as important. You know where I'm coming from with that
it's
statement.
Like, it's a yin and yang, like as good as your music is, you certainly have to have a vehicle, to drive that. And especially now in today's day and age, where everyone has such short and limited attention spans. You have about 15 seconds at most to make an impression, before someone else is off to another device or another whatever it is. It's just like, and I find that right now, especially given, the onslaught, of messages being received and what someone is constantly bombarded with in terms of visual and audio all day, it's, you have to, I feel, be very creative in what
curating
it is.
what you're taking in.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to kind of curate your own message.
Let me ask you from your perspective, because I think you have a very unique perspective coming from, running an iconic record boutique, Phantasmagoria, to working, at EMI, to being a label guy. Do you think where we're at now with streaming and social media and all of the obvious stuff that we don't have to go over, is it helping to push the culture forward, or is it hindering it? How do you feel? What's your take on that?
You can't stop it, if you know what I mean. So I feel I had a similar conversation with someone the other day about this, just with regard to, and he's of an older generation, and just with regard to, like, what do you believe these days? What is your source of truth, really? Is what it comes down to. Like back in the day, you would rely on such and such news media,
credible news sources,
Rolling Stone, Billboard, whatever,
or such and such journalist.
Yeah.
You had an affinity for because you thought he was giving you.
He understood the shit,
the grit, like the real, the real.
In hip hop, we had Source Magazine at a point. The
like,
Bible.
I find that, and even then, perhaps, we were all naive, because even these people had their agendas as well, but nonetheless, now it's very hard to navigate,
what's clickbait, what's shock value,
what's real and what's not. Or what's credible and what's not.
Truth.
Credible.
People create their own truth.
Credible's the word.
Yeah,
That's
I
credible.
mean, you know, from the Oval Office, you know, to a person posting stuff on Instagram, you know, like what's real, what's not, and it's from. So when you're asking me, like, I think
I'm just curious from the guy who did traditional, marketing at a record label to the model being flipped inside out and turned backwards now. What's
I
your
kind of
take
like
on
it in a way, and I like it because it's the equivalent to the Wild Wild West. So anyone, you know, can break through. You know, even if just for a moment.
Just for a moment. I love that you said that.
Well, it's true.
Because those fucking gatekeepers, you know, whether it was, you know, the music business was a landmine of gatekeepers. It was very easy to blackball people once upon a time. And now in the information age, it's kind of like, yo, if you could get your shit popping just for an instance, you become part of the conversation at least. Doesn't ensure you to have a career, but, you know, you can get into the conversation.
I just think that you can be discovered, you know, by virtue of what you do. Mm-hmm. You can do it very DIY, mm-hmm. and it can amount to something. Mm-hmm. It's not, you know, you don't have to be reliant on a label right now. Mm-hmm. You don't have to. You know, that's not to say that you wouldn't want to, because, you know, labels offer things that, you know, are perhaps beyond what you can do on your own.
It's resources,
you know?
Right?
And it's a team.
It's a team, and can you afford as an artist to pay a floor of people a salary to work on your project? Most of the time, not. That's the benefit I've always felt. I've had probably 5 or 6 different record deals in my life. Some of them stateside, some of them with you guys, some of them with Guru, some of them with distributors. And I always enjoyed that element of having that camaraderie and having a team around, you know, a team of people who believe in your project.
Yes.
As long as they push it.
Right. No, but they're getting paid. Are they believing in your product, or are they getting a check from the label?
Well, when you were working with certain people like Lenny who are passionate about what they do, you've definitely felt the difference.
I feel like the new style now is you have a bunch of buddies and they come up with you, and hopefully they're not snakes or whatever, and one guy is your video guy, one guy is your manager, one guy, and these are your boys.
In a perfect world,
yeah,
your boys.
Right.
But in the real
James.
world, you had people like Lenny who, you know, actually swam through the shit and knew what he was doing by the time he got to your project. Not your buddy who you grew up with who might be illiterate or, you know, you know what I'm saying? Might not be capable of, you know, taking it where it needs to go.
I was always, I always fought for my artists. Sometimes I fought with them, you know, but I always fought for them. And when I worked with them, like in the thick of it, when I was doing my most damage, I was in an executive position so that I was able to translate that message to the field. In other words, you know, like if I was fighting for your record, then everyone, you know, that I worked with and that answered to me also fought for your record. And that's not to say that I necessarily loved it, but they definitely felt the passion that I felt for it. And because of the way I operated in the world, you know, in this music industry, you know, fortunately, touch wood, you know, like, thank you. I always had a good reputation because I always treated people with respect, even though I wanted to win. Mm-hmm. You know, I obviously wanted all of the projects that I was working on and all of the great artists I was working with, I wanted them to succeed because their success, you know, equaled the label's success. I was never one that was, you know, out there kind of looking for the spotlight. I was much more content to kind of hang back a little bit and just see the team succeed. You know, like that was
Wise,
always
Lenny.
why.
That's wise, I said.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. I mean, I always played team sports and that kind of thing, and I was I was a good player, but I played with other good players, and it was good players making other good players better.
Did you ever think about going into management,
Artist management.
being a manager of an artist or a band?
Yes, and I have, but only kind of more in the beginning of my career.
Because you would be a hell of a manager.
It's funny that you say that. Thank you.
I mean it.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Might just force you to manage some people.
We're gonna see. I'm working on something now, and that facet of the business is part of the equation.
I think it has to be, and I think like there's few people suited for it as well as you.
Thank you, but maybe not.
That's an honest response. You're fired, you piece
exactly. You're fired.
of shit. I tried to be nice, but you're useless.
No,
Get out of
I
here.
just listen. I think any role in the music business, whether it's artist management or working at a label or being a booking agent or whatever it is, a lot of it is there's a lot of thankless, heavy lifting bullshit that you have to deal with all the time.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because now as a grown ass man, I remember being a teenager, punk kid terrorizing everybody I was working with. And I wish I knew now. I mean, I wish I knew then what I know now, which is, hey, you're lucky if you have some mentally capable adults who believe in you enough to put their time and their energy into you. And I wish I had been, I don't feel like I burned any bridges or anything like that. I wasn't that stupid, but I wish I would have really been even more appreciative and more thankful at the time, rather than having this narrative. Because I'm sure you remember the narrative was like artist against label, and the label's always out to fuck the artist.
Of course.
And when the bottom fell out of the conventional model, we were, really happy if we would have a team of people who were getting paid by someone else to help us out. And it was so priceless. But back then the narrative was, if you're the shit and you're, a hot commodity and you're a talented artist, it's always almost you versus the label.
Yeah, because
as an artist,
the artist always felt like they were getting fucked.
They're getting cheated.
They were getting fucked out of royalties.
And we were
or they getting
paranoid
fucked out
because we were taught that. And we were like, we can never see the books. We never know if we're really recouping. But it was delusional, because who the fuck would have listened to these projects if it wasn't for a company putting it out there in a professional way?
And then 50-50 net receipt deals,
There was some shit in there, don't get me wrong.
Came into play. And, when I started Club Roll, which was my own label with Dan Seligman and Sean Bronstein, we were doing 50-50 net receipt deals. So what did that mean? That meant that...
That was just prior to the 360 deal.
It was just after.
Oh, it was
just after. Yeah, the 360 deal that had its.
Maybe you can explain to the viewers what these two different scenarios
Break it down
are
for me, please.
Well, a 360 deal, at least from what I remember it being, was that the label had a piece of every.
Stream of revenue.
Yeah, exactly.
Live shows, merch.
On everything the artist would bring, from top on down. So it wasn't just on masters, and it wasn't, just on publishing. It was also on merch.
That's right.
It was just on all revenue.
So to clarify, the traditional record deal touched the sound recording. right? So if somebody would license your music for a film or for a video game, they would get a piece of that. But the artist,
on the masters,
yes,
but there would be the publishing.
they would get a
side
piece
as well.
of half of it, let's say, and then obviously they would, loan the money for the project, and all the initial sales they would have to recoup from, and then they would pay the artist. That's the traditional deal. Gotcha. And the 360 deal started when sales were going down. And they wanted to share in any possible revenue that the artist would touch.
So publishing as well, live was a big one, merchandise, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then spawn the 50-50.
The 50-50 net receipt deal was essentially like you're a partner with the artist, whereby, everything is transparent.
That was the last deal I signed.
You're showing, the label is showing you exactly what is being spent on marketing and promotion and publicity and all this stuff. And based on what your advance was and all the other stuff, like no one makes any money until that money is recouped. And when people do make money, it's split 50-50 with the artist.
So it was the spirit of a real partnership. Rather than the artist feel like he's working for 10% if he's lucky to ever recoup.
Yeah, and more often than not, these were licensed deals. So the artist always owned their masters.
Yeah.
The label just licensed them.
First time it's a partnership, and you're saying we instead of I. It's us. It's right?
Yeah, but that creates other problems or other challenges.
Talk to us about those challenges.
It's just like. The artist then wonders, well, we just did this press campaign. Why didn't it work? Or, I think the bottom line is this. If the artist or a band could do it all by themselves, they would.
No shit.
But they can't.
Nobody
can.
can.
And it's not a diss that.
Nobody can.
It's even beyond that. It's just like, if you're really, really so focused in on the business end of things, then
the art's gonna suffer.
Yeah. How can you really reach your artistic potential?
Doesn't the industry require you to be the full package these days? To kind of have a grasp on everything?
Not really, because I'll tell you something. In my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lenny, the narrative now is that everybody who's hip and who's like killing the music business right now is independent. But in reality, they are not. They just appear to be independent.
Okay.
All these guys who you see going viral after the initial whatever got them there, they click up fast. There's always an infrastructure behind them. It's just now, even marketing wise, I've read that a lot of artists prefer not to be like marketed like they're signed to a major label. Whereas once upon a time, it was like a badge of honor to be signed to a Def Jam or a Sony or whatever, right?
Right.
Times changed. Like Motown, these were all like these, dynasty labels that it was prestigious to be connected to. But now the narrative became, independent is cool, kind of, for lack of a better explanation. But a lot of these artists, I know, especially on the hip hop side, are definitely signed to pretty conventional record deals
and
management deals.
In this particular instance, like I'm no expert, but I'm driving back from the country, and we're listening to Sirius. We were listening to XMU, and we were listening to just a bunch of different stations on Sirius. And in listening to some of these new bands, I'm pretty amazed, and like, I mean, even though for example, there's this band called Greta Van Fleet.
Okay.
They're a new band or a newish band, and yet, they really sound or are trying to sound a lot like Led Zeppelin and do. Now, for me, it sounds a little too much like it, like almost like they're trying to beat them a little bit, and to the point of where it almost sounds like a parody, for me. But
we get that in hip hop a lot.
But it's still really cool to see. And they're just one band I'm naming off the top of my head. I can't remember some of the other bands I was listening to because I was hearing their music for the first time, and it was very derivative of some 60s and 70s kind of sounding, you know? So a lot more, I guess the word is organic. Mm-hmm. And I find that maybe that's a trend right now. Mm-hmm. I find that over the last little while, things were just like intensely produced, you know, and I'm finally starting to catch a few glimpses of like this more organic kind of rock vibe coming back.
That's dope.
And me likey.
That's dope.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, speaking of, you know, different artists.
And I don't like Greta Van Fleet. Okay, just saying.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah, just saying.
Fuck you, Greta Van Fleet, and we don't like your name either.
Not fuck them, but just like, I don't know.
I'm joking. I don't even know who Greta Van Fleet is.
I'd rather listen to, you know, Zeppelin 3 than Greta Van Fleet. Yes.
Speaking of artists, what have been some of your proudest moments working with artists, working with bands? What were they? And I would love a nightmare story. Who was an absolute lunatic, an absolute nightmare to work with? So give me the high and the low.
Oh boy. Okay, well,
throw them right under the bus.
A very memorable time, like one of my most memorable moments working with an artist was with the band Metric. Mm-hmm. And it was when Donald pulled some strings because he was tight with Michael Cole back in the day. Mm-hmm. He pulled some strings and he got Metric to be the opening band for the Rolling Stones at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you fuckers never did nothing like that for me, huh?
No.
But I still like you.
No, but he did other things for you, Donald.
He did.
Donald liked you.
I liked and still like Donald a lot. I really learned a lot from him, like business, you know. He was always straight with me, you know. Scoops.
That's what we used to call him. Scoopy.
Fucking Donald. I remember being like 17, going in his office like, hey, Donald, I want to go to New York to try and like, you know, battle rap some people and make some contacts. And he'd just be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. He'd go into his little briefcase, take whatever money he didn't gamble at the casino, whatever he had left over. And he's like, there's $700 there, kid. Take it and be merry and just sign a paper what you took. And I'd be like, this is the uncle I never had.
Donald.
This is great.
$700.
700 and just take the bus and eat McDonald's. And you know what the best part is? I thought I hit the jackpot getting that 700 American or whatever he had laying in his briefcase. And, you know, shout out to Donald and all you guys because, you know, you were able to slowly turn my dream into reality before I met, you know, the gurus and the people that I ended up meeting stateside. DKD was a great home and was, you know, I have nothing but great memories. And because of the grants and the connections that Donald had, we were able to fund this art. You know what I mean? And it's a challenge now, but it was a super challenge back then to get an English hip hop project out in Quebec. Almost
Amazing.
Impossible.
Amazing.
And we were one of the only few that were able to achieve that, and I'm really proud of that. And thank you for whatever part you played at the time.
Thank you.
We're talking about Plattenberg, right?
Yeah.
What a great fucking project.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a bit ahead of its time.
It was very ahead of its time.
You know, that's how you were doing things that, especially in Planet Quebec, no one knew what the fuck was happening.
No.
No one knew what the hell was
They didn't even know I was an alien.
Yeah.
I would walk into meetings, people, I would just see the look on their face. They're mortified. They don't even know what I'm talking about.
They didn't even know what the hell was going on, man.
Gangstar? What's gangster? Gangster. We don't want no gangsters. No, gangstar. Not gangsters. We're not going to bring gangsters there. Maybe a couple, but not that many.
Gangstar.
But we had a fucking great time. And I remember I was sitting in your office and Parkside, and Pat, shout out Pat Guay, who's been on the show, good friend of the show. He had done like a little mock-up cover, and it was like a random like office tower with like a Plattenberg like Enterprises on the thing. And You were Parkside was like, this is really too much, Bless. We should change the cover. And I'm like, I don't know, it's pretty cool. And they're like, but it kind of looks like you're like own an office building. And it's unbelievable because you're 17 years old.
It was, but wasn't that the record cover?
It didn't end up being, no.
Oh, it was at the table.
It ended up being a round table of all my guys in suits and shit.
Yeah.
It was like a little mafia table meeting.
Some money texture going on.
Pat
there.
put like the American eagles and shit all over it, like the watermarks, like the money stamps and shit.
I remember that first mock-up.
Yeah. We were sitting in your office, I think.
Maybe we thought it was two twin towers.
True.
I think
True.
that was the vibe.
Yeah.
Because that had just happened.
Yeah, I think you're right. That had just happened. And I was in New York recording with Guru when it happened, literally in Manhattan.
I remember being in that office watching it on TV. That shit going down.
Yeah. And I was unfortunate.
So I think that's why we were kind of a little like,
Yeah, good point. Because that record didn't come out till 2003, so we were probably working on all that the year before, right after 9/11. Yeah. Could have been 6 months, 8 months after.
Yeah.
Crazy how time flies.
It's crazy. Yeah. New York. So yeah, we're in New York. And so I was in New York anyway. Maybe it was just in and around the time of CMJ. Which, no, that's wrong. Like Terry said, if you remember it, you weren't really there. Anyway.
Fuck this whole damn interview.
Jeez. I was in New York for something other than just that. And, but that night, and I remember taking my sales rep, my New York sales rep with me. Her name was Denise. She's a great girl, Jersey girl. Mm-hmm. And so we're at Madison Square Garden. And I hook up with Metric, and we go backstage, and we're backstage,
Madison Square Garden, Rolling Stones
with the Rolling Stones, and they're shooting a DVD. So the place, like backstage, it looks like it's NASA, like it's the amount of gear they have, and just what's going on. It's crazy. So I'm watching the roadies. I'm there early, unpack, some of the Stones' gear. And all of a sudden, they start taking out couches and like a bar and, like stools and all this shit. And I watch them assemble a lounge backstage.
That they travel with.
That the Stones travel with, called the Voodoo Lounge.
Oh, that's so gangster.
Fucking so they were Stones. Unpacking like that's sofas
that's the level we need to be at, Lemmy. What the fuck, bro? Brian, why don't we have foldable voodoo lounges when we do podcasts?
So that night, I meet a few of the Stones. I met Ronnie Wood. I met Keith Richards. I met Charlie Watts. And
how is Keith Richards still alive? That's a whole other podcast.
It was just really cool because the memorable part of it was after Metric had played, and really, to say that anyone gave a shit, no one really gave a shit, but people were still doing their thing. It was Madison Square Garden before the Stones were playing, so they still at least got an audience.
Yeah, sure.
But after they were done and the Stones were on, I had an all access pass, so I started wandering with the bass player of Metric, just all over kind of Madison Square Garden, and we got down to the floor and we, I was like, yo, we can't go right up to the stage, and Josh, the bass player of Metric, was like, just walk like you own it, and, or something to that effect, and so we just kind of sauntered up right to the edge of the stage, and playing right there, practically sweating on us was Keith Richards, and it was just like, it's not even like I'm such a huge Stones fan.
Yeah.
It was just
surreal
to be that close to these guys, that were such seminal influences on so many different people, and were the bad boys of rock and roll, There we were, and they were old, and this was already quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, there they were, and there we were, just kind of looking up at them like this, like just watching the Stones play Brown Sugar.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that was a really memorable moment. And another one, just while we're on the topic of Metric, I can't remember which show it was for them, but it was just when they were breaking, and it was a super, super important gig for them. And before they went on stage, it was dark, and everyone was just chanting for them to go on or whatever. And just before they went on stage, they kind of got into this little huddle, and I was just standing kind of off to the side, just like in the shadow or whatever. But I just saw a moment between them before they went on stage that was just super special, where they just kind of was like, you saw there, it was them against the world right there, and they just kind of got together, and they were like, we're going to kill this show. And they really did. Nice. And it was one of the nights that kind of propelled their careers to that next level. And I just saw that little kind of band huddle, before they went on, and it was just a kind of just a really special moment.
Nice.
Yeah. Just to see it, not be part of it necessarily, but just to be part of it enough to just see that,
That's dope.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing Metric was one of your favorite acts to work with.
They were one of the more successful ones, There were really cool times, and there were not such cool times.
We're gonna get there. Last Gang Records, for those who might not be familiar, you, Chris Taylor.
He fired me by email.
Nice guy. We'll get into that. What were some of the acts that you guys were working with at the time?
Well, Last Gang started basically with Metric and Death from Above, 1979, and there were two others that I can't remember who they were right now. Slan? It was Suk-Yin Lee's band. Do you remember Suk-Yin?
I remember her from Much Music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it was really just thought of something really funny. It was really Death from Above and Metric that propelled the label and really put it on the map, because both those bands did really well, and each had their own following, and it was like a friendly competition almost, between them. Right? We knew there was a bit of not a rivalry, but a little bit. Like each one of them wanted to be, the most important band on Last Gang, and they both were kicking ass. So that was really those two bands and their success, and then Crystal Castles was
very big on the electronic side.
Yeah. Crystal Castles was very big for us.
Boys Noize as well.
Yeah, but less so than Crystal Castles.
Chromeo.
Sure. Chromeo, very successful for Last Gang, but didn't have. I think the coolest bands on the label were Death from Above and Crystal Castles.
With all of these projects, obviously, I'm sure you were doing marketing. Were you, because I know you're very good with the whole layouts, album layouts, were you in charge of...
I wasn't doing album art or anything like that. Gotcha. I was more taking the art that was available,
selling it,
creating new art, but mostly for, marketing, advertising, promo
flipping the assets and booking all the ads and stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And then, there was one time where I can't remember what, it was for a gig in Montreal, and I got a call from Emily Haynes, and she just lost it. She was the lead vocalist of Metric, and she just lost her marbles.
It was very close with Chaos, actually. Chaos.
I worked with Chaos, too. Chaos was signed to Last Gang America.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't even know that.
I can't remember for what record,
Chaos was always, to me, very talented. I liked his shit, but every time I met him, it was always awkward. Like we had like these weird Seinfeld, it was always awkward. But shout out Kevin, man. I ended up meeting him a couple times later
He's
with the boys
he's
from
a cool
Tokyo
dude.
and shit when he came.
He's a cool dude.
Yeah.
You know, I think that artists that are really talented, they certainly have their vision of who they are and how they want to come across and how they want to be perceived. And that's good. That's good. And labels, good labels, understand that, but also know that if the artist would just do this, they would be that much further ahead, right? Or if they would just do that.
And then is where the age-old conflict comes with, fuck the label, they're trying to alter my art, they're trying to, change who I am, and there's no way I'm going to sell out and do that.
I think that's something that both sides have to chill the fuck back on, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In other words, I've
agree with
learned
that.
in my humble experience, I'm older now, that you...
Thank God you're not any wiser.
Yeah. God help us. I think that people have to really do a better job of putting themselves in the other person's shoes. And it's simple. It's as simple as that, really. Because if you have talented people on both sides, each, striving for that goal, right? Then how is it that, the well sometimes gets poisoned?
Well, you know what? I couldn't agree with you more. And when it comes to any project that, you're passionate about and you're lucky enough to have other like-minded individuals believing in, you should find multiple ways to motivate that person and to keep that fire
it's
burning.
ego at the end of the day. It's ego.
I try and steer away from that as much as humanly possible now.
It's ego. I've worked, especially when I had my label with Dan, and with one particular band that I worked with. I had such real belief in what the potential was. They just had this certain rawness to them, that I saw in it that they just needed a little polish and a little direction, and they would have been able to achieve, But what happened was ego got in the way.
Between each other or in relation to the label?
On all fronts,
Gotcha.
on all levels, really. And that really was the beginning of the end.
Once that happens, there's no coming back.
You
right?
have to share.
Right. Well, your selflessness is something that I'm going to take away from this, because I was on a team where I had to be Steve Kerr, and I always thought I was Michael Jordan, and I can only come in for a little bit and do a couple of things, then I got to sit back down, and I struggle with that to this day of not being the man. And you seem very comfortable not being the man, but still being a key contributor, and that's it's a cool thing, man.
Thank you. I don't know. I just think music is very special, and for it to, when you're creating something, you're taking it from nothing and bringing it out into the universe. If not
Special.
not everyone can do that.
Special.
Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can have a melody or whatever in their head, or
Bring it to life.
a lyric or whatever it is, and manifest that. and bring it out, and not only bring it out, but give it a home, a space.
That reminds me of something you said to me. Me and Lenny hadn't seen each other. After seeing each other very frequently for 10 years of my career, we then pretty much hadn't seen each other in 10 years. So Lenny came by my studio and we had a little listening session, and he played me a passion project, a side project that he's working on called Bobby Cairo. And talk to me about that moment when you were playing that guitar riff and you got emotional. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do, sure. After all throughout me having a label and jamming with some of the artists that I signed to the label just for fun.
They had to do it or else they'd be dropped.
Not at all. It was like the reverse, you know? And I always was tight with one musician, and we continued to jam together. And then we decided his name is Julian Corrado, and he's in another band called Flamingos Pink. And
sounds like a porno.
They are a porno. They're rock porn. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, they're excellent. Anyway, we decided to do something together, and it's called Bobby Cairo. The project is called Bobby Cairo. So for the first time, I went into a studio to record as an artist, as opposed to be in a studio as an A&R person or as a
Scummy
producer
executive.
or some whatever. I was there to actually lay shit down. And so I did for the first time, and then for a second time, and I found that whole experience to be a very, very liberating and life-changing experience for me.
That's dope.
Because it allowed me to just do more than just jam or play or noodle around or whatever. It actually allowed me to take songs that I had written with Julian and put them down so that they're there for all time, and finally release things, melodies, stuff that's been kicking around for a long time. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, bro.
It's so important.
And yes,
to actually just get, if for nothing else, just get it out.
It was also incredibly cathartic because it helped me. A lot of the lyrics and the things I had written and the themes I was expressing was just a release of a lot of shit, a lot of pain, a lot of stuff that needed to come out, and I knew needed to come out musically. And the time finally presented itself. So I found myself in the studio, a place called Thank You for Smoking Studios. That's run by Phil Pelletier. He's awesome.
Great movie, by the way.
And I found myself with headphones on and listening to a click and having to be pro. And yet, like stepping to the plate and fucking and doing what I had to do because, and also not fucking around. Like I didn't want to get all precious about stuff. Like I told you earlier, like we were laying shit down in one take.
Yeah.
One take.
You don't want to lose the feeling. You want it to be
We
totally
didn't want to lose
organic.
the feeling. We didn't want to fool around either. Like, we just wanted to kind of guerrilla warfare it. It's not perfect. But the mistakes are beautiful.
I feel like that's been a common theme in your entire ride in the music business.
It's not perfect.
Well, no, far from it. But going to war,
Could be worse.
Soldiering it out, doing shit guerrilla, just jumping in and figuring it out.
Often, yeah. I mean, that's not to say that I didn't strategically plan a lot of shit either. But sometimes it's been a lot about just like kind of enduring,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, sometimes just going into a room and just fucking, you know, letting everyone have it and, you know, see who's still standing after, you know.
Oh, I remember meetings like that.
You know, and then but also, you know, you get the shit kicked out of you too. You know, you get the shit kicked out of you. I've had to
this business
really navigate and you know, in the shark pool.
Yeah.
You know,
this business has a funny way of inflating you like no other and deflating you like no other sometimes, you know?
yeah. What I've learned is you have to listen to your instinct. You have to trust your instinct more. Like I would hear it, but I wouldn't listen to it in the past, you know, but it was there.
Because you're so hyped for the opportunity and you want to believe in it.
It's also ego,
so badly.
you know, like you think you can, you know, conquer anything, you know, or not that you're smarter than everyone, but more just like you can outlast them.
This business is an ego-driven business too many times, you know.
It is.
It's always been.
But then, you know, getting back to what we were talking about, like there I was in the studio, and that was like the last song of the session, and I just I knew it was after a long day where we were running and gunning. We must have banged out 7 songs, you know, where I played guitar, bass, and we did vocals and perks, like all in one day, and keys, and that was the end of the day, and it was the song was essentially over, but I just kept playing the rhythm guitar because I was just kind of lost in the moment, and I didn't want it to end, and I just felt very, very emotional in that moment, where I felt like this was a long time coming that I would do this, and the point of making this music, Bobby Cairo music, wasn't to dominate the world. It was purely just to bring something internal out. And bring it into the world, and want the music to connect with other people. That's what it's about. It's about connection.
It's always what it's been.
Yeah.
That's why the most exciting thing you can do is play live, and you gauge the reaction of the audience. You know, you see them, the impact that it makes. You see the fucking look on their face. You see if they're moving to it. You see if it's making them hype, emotional,
dance,
whatever.
Yeah.
And
it's about the connection. And that's why artists throughout, you know, when I've worked with them, I think they've realized that I can help them establish that.
Specifically, that feeling you're talking about is the reason personally I dedicated my whole life to, no matter how I navigated, no matter how big the ups and downs were, it always gave me something to look forward to. It always drew me back. That's why the studio is the most sacred place I could be. I'd rather be there than watching a fucking sports event or you know, anything almost that I can think of.
Absolutely. Like if I ever, or I should say when I get that chance to actually, you know, when Bobby Cairo plays live, you know, like my bandmate plays shows all the time. You know, he's actually in 2 other bands, you know, and there's that communion with an audience, that connection with an audience that he has experienced that I really want to experience. And I haven't yet.
You've never played live, like a big venue?
I have, but not
these songs.
Not these songs, not my own music, not in a moment of a time in my life where it would make the most sense.
Sure.
You know? No. Sure. I've denied myself as being an artist for the longest of time.
Well, I definitely would love to be there. You got to let me know.
You will be, of course.
That'll be a full circle moment when I'm going to see Lenny perform.
Yeah, that'll be ridiculous. It'll be ridiculous. Anyway, it's kind of one thing at a time. Right now, you know, I'm kind of reaching out musically in a lot of, well, in two very precise directions. And I one is Bobby Cairo, you know, and just it's a personal project. I haven't done anything with it yet. I haven't shopped it around. I haven't. It's just up on SoundCloud, and I'm watching spins go up, and I don't know who the fuck's playing it. Like, I really don't know.
You could check some of the analytics, but that's about it.
Yeah, but you know, like, but even if I do, I don't know who these people are, and the fact that they're
Or how
actually
they're stumbling upon it.
It's just like it's a total science experiment right now.
Sure.
You know,
And that's fun. Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun to hear a lot of positive vibes about it, and just people kind of freaking out a little bit, you know. Yeah, and then there's another direction that shall remain mysterious for the time being, but I'm working on something now.
That something sounds very
I
interesting.
checked out your what was it? Your LinkedIn. You do lighting as well, right?
Yeah,
Is that the main gig?
It's called Lenny Lights. Lenny Lighting.
But it's like industrial lighting, right?
it's like hotel lighting and design. So I was just in New Orleans and then New York for like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. I was like trying to get him to come in. He's like, I'm traveling. I'm like, when are you back? What day?
For two like heavy design shows. The New York show was a hotel design show where the company that I'm working for, their specialty is lighting, but also interior design for hotels and venues and restaurants and commercial spaces and that kind of thing. And I'm responsible for the business development end of it, because I'm handling a lot of their marketing. And you know, my gig is really to just kind of modernize them a little bit. But the thing I enjoy the most about that gig is the design gig, the design aspect of it, where I am, you know, creating new things, often building shit with my hands.
Oh, cool.
And then going out to, you know, some big shows to kind of promote all that stuff. So
Seems to be
cool.
the theme, right? The reoccurring theme is to take something from nothing, doesn't exist, and then putting it out to the world. That's
Yeah, you got it.
Right?
You nailed it.
You'd be birthing.
Yeah.
You'd be birthing shit.
Yeah. That's I love it. I love doing that. I love the creative aspect of business, I guess.
Was it a relief from you, you know, taking, let's say, maybe a pause from, you know, running Last Gang to having your own label to kind of moving out of the music business for a couple of years? Were you relieved, sad, excited? You know, I can imagine relieved, because there's so much bullshit and red tape that you deal with in the music business all the time. So finally you're trading tangible things for money in a timely manner, dealing with hopefully mentally rational people somewhat. Speak to me about that.
Well, I needed a break, and the opportunity and timing presented itself. And I was a bit relieved, you know, and I guess in feeling that, I guess, sense of a little bit more security, you know, like if the music business, like I never ever have felt job security.
You never were, motherfucker.
I never will, you know, like it's never something that I've felt.
Yeah.
So I felt it for a second, but you know, it's a false sense of security, really, because ultimately it's still, no matter what, it's up to you to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful for a few things. I'm very grateful that I was able to get into something, that I was able to learn a new business relatively quickly and then succeed at it
And step out of your comfort zone.
and step out of my comfort zone and do something completely different, and yet still have skills that were transferable to this new gig.
Sure.
Whereby I just find that the ability to communicate is just, if you're in business, you need to know how to communicate, and you need to know how to get your objective and message across and disarm people.
Well, I've always said the training that we received in the music business applied to a real industry. And I don't want to say it's not a real industry, but you know what I mean. We deal with a lot of bullshit and a lot of Mickey Mouse shit.
A lot of bullshit.
Yeah, when you're dealing with, like, a tangible product and an industry that's, constantly trading on a daily basis, that approach that, we had to swim with these sharks is definitely helpful.
And then throw in the fact that if you have a criminal record, you're almost more respected. It's the only industry.
Oh no, I'm not talking
world.
about the music business. I'm saying taking the music business training and applying
And
it,
bring it,
to
okay.
the conventional business world is like a hot knife through butter. We just come in there because we're like, hey, what do you mean we're actually going to get paid for our efforts?
Right.
This is great.
It was relief, but also, and I also kind of exiled myself a little bit from the business, for
Music wise.
Yeah. But it was during that time that I always played guitar, and throughout it all, I always was playing, but it was during that time where I wasn't in the music business that I was able to rediscover my love, not of music per se, but just of playing it, and of creating it. And my only experience with it would be listening to it or playing it, as opposed to managing it.
Sure.
And that if I hadn't had that hiatus, I don't think Bobby Cairo would ever exist.
No, that project wouldn't have existed.
No way.
And interesting, your project now, and you kind of re-falling in love with playing and all that stuff, came out of necessity because, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably risked it all financially to start your own label when you left Last Gang.
I did.
And you put yourself in a very tight position so you could continue to bring these projects to the world, and so you could continue working in an industry that you were obviously passionate about.
Yeah, I did. And I didn't want to work for anyone at that time, because my last experience working for someone ended by, like I said, me getting fired by email.
Unfucking real. I mean, I don't know the circumstances, but I'm pretty sure you didn't pull your dick out at the Christmas party. So,
no.
Like, after working with people and, putting your life into something for years, it is pretty shitty to be fired by an impersonal email,
Yeah, it was bullshit. But, and
but that's the music business, kid.
That's the music
Suck
business.
it up.
That's what it is, right? Or that's what it was.
He tried firing Lemmy a few times, but he never gets the fucking emails.
I thought it was
Guy
just
never
bullshit.
checks his emails.
I don't have data on my phone.
You never fucking check your emails.
Just bullshit. But that's what it was, and it made me stronger. At that time in my life anyway, there were so many things that were going down at the same time that was just, it was a tsunami of shit, and that was part of it. And it was a catalyst in other things that went down, and I think ultimately, even though a lot of them were very painful, I think that at the end of it all, and here we are talking, I'm hitting a new stride right now, and there's a
Absolutely.
new there's a kind of like an end of one cycle and beginning of another one about to
New
happen.
momentum,
It's like
man.
kind of happening right now.
I love the energy. I love the vibe, man.
Yeah, it's positive vibrations, Rasta, man.
And I'm very, very, very curious to see, what's going to come of all of this new momentum and not just your new project with Bobby Cairo, but some other things that you may or may not have in the works.
Got something. There's
little
something.
something.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and I'm gonna know what's up sooner than later now on it.
Perfect. We'll bring you back for that one, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
that'd be
It sounds
good.
like it's brewing.
yeah, it is. Something's brewing.
Okay.
Something's brewing right now.
anything else we didn't cover, Mr. Levine?
We can go on forever. We're bringing back.
Now we're going to go on. No, I'm joking.
You could, man. I don't know. I'm here. You know.
What else didn't we touch?
Wow. I mean, all kinds. I mean, I've known you for so long, and I definitely have had quite a few experiences in the music business.
I know you have.
Yeah, we can talk about Sum 41.
Tell me a bit about them. Were you there when Sum 41 first gets signed and Donald takes us all out to Barbie Barn for ribs?
Of course.
In the West.
No, downtown.
Okay.
Close to the
They
office.
loved
that one
that
in the
place.
West is-
They loved that place.
They love that place. So
They
for,
Dim lit.
so for the rest of my career, I had this like kinship with the guys from Sum 41. And then they started coming to my New Year's parties, which were like very hip hop, street crowd. And then like Sum 41 would just be backstage with me. And people would just be like, how the fuck are you even like know each other, let alone
label
hanging
mates,
out? You know?
right?
I can't remember. Yeah. They were label
We were
mates.
label
I can't. I think it was maybe one year for Van's Warped Tour, where I'm with a band and back then it was called no, it was Parc Jean Drapeau, and so I go onto the bus and Sum 41's bus, and there is Derek with Avril Lavigne. Okay.
Sick.
And so I go up to Cone, and I think I'm there with Parkside, and we start having some beers or whatever, and I tell them I'm going to meet them backstage or whatever it is, and then but first I have to stop by their trailer. So I end up wandering around. I can't find their fucking trailer, and so I find this one trailer. I think it's theirs. I open the door. I walk in, and who's there? But Dave Grohl. And it's a random Sum 41 story. And I'm like, oh, shit, sorry, Dave. I didn't mean to interrupt. Wrong trailer. He's like, hey, man, want a beer? So for 20 minutes, I was sitting there with Dave Grohl. We were just shooting the shit. And
He just needed a friend at the moment.
he's
Just
such a
used you.
friendly guy.
Right.
Like, he was just such a friendly guy.
Just broed out with you.
And just hung out for 15 minutes with Dave Grohl.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sum 41.
Boom.
That's a podcast, 15 minutes with Dave Grohl. Go.
He was an awesome dude and very friendly, just shooting the shit, like did not kick me out. Yeah, he was like a genuine dude. Yeah.
So if you're ever stumbling backstage, you can probably get him to share a story.
Dave Grohl. Yeah, that was a long time ago. In a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
I like how you guys look at each other. You really love each other, eh?
No, it's just very nostalgic. It's
It's
and
really
he's
good.
very calming. His tone of voice calms me down.
I've been told
This guy's like my spirit animal. He just starts talking. Like he once brought me into his office.
Oh my God.
And he sat me down and I was like, hey, like I'm doing this electronic project and you have Chromeo and Boys Noize and fucking sign my project. Like this is my homie, you know? Like, what are you going to do with that guitar, Lenny, and sign my project? And I'm like playing records and I'm like pitching him on. Yeah, I'm in Toronto now, da da da. And then he's like,
No, I liked it though. I
Thank you.
remember I liked what you played.
thank you. And he's like, when are you gonna have kids, Bless?
I don't remember that, man.
Oh, I'll never forget it. And I'm like, no time soon. Why are you asking me this? And I'm like in a whole different phase of my life. And he's like, you should really have kids. You're a great guy. And there's nothing better. It's what life's all about. And then he goes, just teach them to be awesome little human beings. And that always stuck with me and made me feel guilty for not having kids yet.
Oh, no.
Yet.
I don't wanna make you
it's
feel-
motivating me because I do want to have kids one day. But yeah, that always stuck with me. So thank you for that life advice.
Sorry about that, man.
No, it's a good thing, man. You tried to say get off the roller coaster and be a normal.
Dude, I'm sorry about that.
Person. I apologize for giving you good advice.
I must have just had my kids. That's probably why I was tripping balls on kids.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
You're on your dad vibe heavy.
Yeah.
Heavy dad vibe.
Oh my God. I remember when Hayden was born, he never fucking slept. He never slept. And I was going to South by Southwest that year. And so I was flying Montreal to either Chicago or Denver. I can't remember. And I had figured out that the gate, that my connecting flight was in fact the same flight that I had just flown in. Like if I were flying into Chicago, that same plane that I had just flown to Chicago and then was going to Austin, that was the exact same plane and exact same gate that was being used for my connection.
Easy enough.
Did I explain that?
Yeah,
right?
easy enough.
Okay. So
Not a big walk.
I was like, okay, do I even have to get off the plane? Right? So I actually went up to the flight attendant.
For sure.
Can I just chill?
This is the craziest shit. I went up to the flight attendant, right? And I showed her, for my boarding pass for the connecting flight was indeed this from this gate, this flight, whatever. And she was like, wow. I'm like, yeah. Do I even have to get off? Do I even have to get off the plane? And she was like, you know what? No, if you don't mind the cleaning crew coming in or whatever, you can just stay on the plane, sir. I'm like, cool. This was at the start of my flight from Montreal to Chicago or Denver or wherever it was that I was going to connect to Austin. And as soon as she said that, I sat down in my seat. I was so tired from not getting any sleep from my firstborn son, never sleeping, right? I sat down in the seat and I passed out, okay? The next thing I know, or the next thing I hear, is the captain saying that we're about to land in Austin, Texas. I missed the cleaning crew. I missed the landing in Chicago. I missed the cleaning crew. And then when the captain said that, I opened my eyes, and the girl, there's this woman sitting next to me I've never seen before. She was like, "Good morning, sleepyhead." That's what she, I missed the plane deplaning, the new people coming in, the takeoff, the flight, and I didn't miss the landing, but almost. And I had
We're basically teleported to your destination.
I had slept through the connection.
That's great.
Yeah, that's how fucked up I was from being a new dad.
That's the best flight ever.
Yeah. Good morning, sleepyhead. I'll never forget that. I laughed so hard.
The
People are
closest.
so polite on planes too. They always want to be your friends. So she was waiting all day for you to wake up.
Oh man, the closest I have, and it has nothing to do with that, theme. But my nightmare of a flight, worst flight I ever took, was I had gone to Vegas for the Magic convention. It's like the clothing convention they do every year, and I went with the people from Rockaware here in Canada. And like every night there's a different insane open bar party at whatever is the big club, and it's always open bar, like hosted by this brand or that brand. But like they're sending like full bottles of Patron to your table like for free. And I partied my fucking eyes out. And I said on my way back, I'll fly to Miami to see a good friend of mine who was a producer. I wanted to work on some tracks, stay at his place. He had a home studio. So I said, I'm going to come to Miami on my way back from Vegas. Big mistake. So in my classic style, I didn't sleep before the flight. We partied, drank my face off, ran back to my room, packed my bags, barely caught the flight by the skin of my teeth. And then I'm like, I'm going to pull a Lenny and I'm going to sleep on the flight and I won't even basically, feel the travel time. This is great. And halfway through the flight, and the sun's now coming up, I hear, bing, please put your seatbelts, prepare for emergency landing. And like when you're really half awake, you're like, oh, this is a dream, And you're like, and then I'm kind of like, and then I smell smoke.
Sure.
And I see smoke in the cabin, and I'm like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, please let this be a nightmare. But I'm fucking still drunk, completely whacked out. I've slept for an hour. I'm still sauced. So, you're half whacked out. And like, I say to the flight attendant, I'm like, is this a joke? What's going on? And then she says, well, there's smoke coming from somewhere. We don't know what it is. And we're halfway across the ocean, so we can't turn back. And we're just going to have to fly to the closest airport. And hope we make it? I'm like, so you have no idea what's wrong. And then for the next hour and a half, we just sat terrified. I was alone on the flight and never knew what the smoke was. We ended up obviously landing okay, and that was it. And then I was like, do I even get a fucking refund for my flight? I flew in terror, drunk. And then my buddy picked me up, and he was like, how was the flight? I'm like, you don't even want to know. Let's just go to the hotel. It's fucking crazy.
Oh my God. Man.
Yeah.
You never found out what the smoke was?
Nothing.
Never investigated? You should have.
I honestly was just happy to be alive.
Okay,
just
fair.
wanted to wipe that one from my memory. But creepy stories.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely was amazing catching up with you. Lenny Levine.
The legend.
The
He
rogue.
sounds great.
The rogue motherfucker. Guerrilla style wild man of the music business.
Stop.
Thank you so much for sharing your inspiration, your story from Last Gang to seeing what the future holds, to Bobby Cairo, to DKD,
Good luck with that
to
project.
Phantasmagoria.
Thank you.
A lot of history, man. And thank you for your
man.
contributions to the business and to the culture. And we definitely have to have you back
Thank you,
shortly.
sir. Thank you.
We could
I'd
talk about
love to.
that new thing we're not talking about.
Perfect.
Okay.
Amazing. That'd
The
be
Moment
great.
of Truth podcast. Bless. Let me know. Lenny Levine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, represent